Israel hunts down Hamas, but faces fire from two more fronts. Iran enters the battle, warns of escalation. Will war get more devastating? Cold War 2.0 now playing out. Big focus on NewsTrack.
Hello and welcome. In this war between Israel and the Hamas, there are important questions to which there are no clear answers. These are questions for which there is a range of answers with varying probability. And for insights to questions which are extremely difficult to answer, one of my favorite global gurus is Ian Bremmer. Ian Bremmer teaches at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. He's the editor-at-large for Time magazine and the president and founder of the Eurasia Group, which is a leading global risk advisory consultancy. Ian Bremmer, welcome back to the NewsTrack.
Always good to be with you, sir.
I want to start by asking for your assessment of the real reason behind Israel delaying its much-awaited ground offensive into Gaza. We've been hearing from Israel's defense minister, the Prime Minister, that the invasion is coming. So far, it hasn't started. Why do you think the Israelis are holding back so far?
There are several reasons. The first, in the initial days, is because they did not yet have a war cabinet. It was still Netanyahu and a far-right coalition that really had no business running a war. So they had to wait for that. Once that was in place, there are still three major factors that are slowing them down. The first is an effort to get some hostages out. There are four already. They'd like to have more. The Qatar government has been negotiating with Hamas leadership that is based in Doha. Also, they are trying to get more humanitarian support as well as more capacity to house civilians in Gaza into the south, so reduce the knock-on civilian deaths that will come from a major ground offensive. And then finally, they're giving the Americans the opportunity to put adequate defenses in place for clearly all of the American bases in the region are going to be targeted on the back of this. And the Americans have said they wanted several more days for that. I think that explains the delay. But as you suggest, and I feel quite confident about this, sadly, the likelihood of an imminent ground offensive is almost 100%. You're delaying, you're not stopping it.
In your view, once this offensive begins, how long is it likely to last? How many days, weeks or months may it be before the Israel Defense Forces are able to take control of the Gaza Strip?
It's probably a week or two at the latest before they can divide Gaza, capture and control most of the north, except Gaza City, which of course is where about half of the population is located. So they can cordon Gaza City, basically seal it off. Then going in and actually trying to kill Hamas fighters and destroy the tunnel network. That's a matter of probably months of Fallujah type fighting, certainly more than 1 month, 2 or 3 months, I think, at a minimum. So part of the reason why they have been so reluctant historically, and that includes Prime Minister Netanyahu, is because they're going to take large numbers of Israeli Defense Force casualties, and the human carnage that will come from this kind of warfare is going to be staggering.
Over the past 2 weeks, the Israel Defense Forces have been pounding targets in Gaza. How much of Hamas's military capabilities have been degraded in the past fortnight, and how much of a pushback will the Hamas be able to do to the IDF once they come in?
Keep in mind, Hamas operates in densely populated civilian areas and buildings, and they do that intentionally, and they put their missiles next to schools and hospitals, and that's where their headquarters are. And they also operate with all of these tunnel network that allows them to stage themselves. That's where all of the hostages are presently, which is why there haven't been any rescue efforts by the Israelis. So you can try to take out individual members of the Hamas military leadership, but it is believed that Hamas has between 30 and 40,000 active fighters in Gaza City right now. It's unlikely that more than a tiny fraction of that has been killed through the airstrikes.
And about the tunnel network, the Gaza metro, how much of that has been destroyed in the airstrikes according to you, and how much of it is still functional in your view?
Yeah. First of all, very little of it is destroyed because you still have over 200 hostages that are there. And secondarily, because a lot of that is functioning inside Gaza City itself. So it's really, really challenging to do a lot of what Israel wants to accomplish from the air.
Let's now come to the question about the Hezbollah and the fact that the Hezbollah has been involved militarily in a limited fashion so far with the IDF. Is this likely to turn into a two-pronged conflict with Israel having to deal with the Hamas in the Gaza Strip? And will the Hezbollah open its entire arsenal of rockets and direct them towards Israel?
I suspect they won't. And if they do, it's not because of some kind of fealty to Hamas. It's because Hezbollah does not want to end up isolated if it looks like Hamas is going to be destroyed. Keep in mind, Hezbollah is a militant Shia organization. Hamas is a Sunni organization. They share goals in terms of Israel, but not much else. Hezbollah is much more tightly tied to Iran than Hamas is. They have much, much more capable fighting forces and a lot more sophisticated military, but they're also on a northern border with Israel that is much more heavily defended by the Israelis. And if they wanted to go in and with their brothers Hamas, they would have done so almost immediately after Hamas had attacked, assuming they didn't know about it, and that's my assumption, because they would have caught the Israelis off guard. Now, Israel has called up 360,000 reservists for active duty. That's 4% of Israel's population. They are not just focused on a Gaza war, but they're also focused on further defending in strength and in depth that northern border. The Israelis have pulled back and evacuated a number of villages that have been on that border. So it would be much harder for Hezbollah to pull that off unless they go in really big, at which point there's a war in Lebanon and they're going to get destroyed. Hezbollah also has a strong political wing. They are responsible for governance in Lebanon. They have a lot of employment that they engage with, social services they engage with. That is all at risk if they go much farther than just skirmishing and small incursions and rocket attacks on the border. So I think the bar for Hezbollah getting in is pretty high.
Is Iran likely to get more directly involved in the conflict? We saw from the Iranian Supreme Leader very strong public comments in support of the Hamas. Is it likely to operate through proxies, or could Iran, in your view, get militarily involved?
Again, we already see proxies. There have been, I think, something like 24 American troops that have been injured in a base in Syria. There have also been attacks on bases in Iraq. Those are the Houthis in Yemen, for example, Shia militants in Iraq. That is a proxy war, but it's not a proxy war that is directed or orchestrated by Tehran. I think that will absolutely expand. I expect that Americans in the region, servicemen and women, are going to be casualties, are going to be killed once the Israelis go in the ground war. Absolutely, I sadly think that is going to happen. But the Supreme Leader, who has been very active on social media of late, has given no indication that Iran itself will get involved in the war. And in fact, they've been continuing to engage pretty closely with the Saudis, who they now have a breakthrough diplomatic agreement with. And that implies more stability in the region, but not direct involvement in escalation. Keep in mind, intelligence that the Americans have, what the Israelis accept, show that Iran was itself surprised when Hamas attacked on October 7th. So at least for now, the one thing that could really affect the global economy, the Indian economy, the Western economies, oil to 150, Trump becoming president, would be if Iran gets directly involved in the war, because then their oil is off the market. Then the Straits of Hormuz suddenly become a problem to get oil out. I think the likelihood of that, fortunately, is very, very low.
I was speaking to Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, earlier, and he made the point that many Israelis don't necessarily buy what American intelligence is saying about the involvement of Iran. They also feel it's being done to ensure that Iran doesn't get militarily involved, because if there is an admission that Iran, like the Wall Street Journal has reported, trained some of these Hamas fighters on Iranian soil, then Iran getting directly militarily involved increases, and that's not good for the world, which is why US Intel is trying to play down the direct involvement of Iranian intelligence and the Revolutionary Guards.
The Iranians are complicit. That does not mean that they orchestrated it. Those are two different things. They have provided consistently financial support, military support, and training right up through the attacks on October 7th. So no one should say the Iranians are not involved. They are involved, and my friend Ehud Barak is correct in that regard. They did not orchestrate or direct the attacks. The Israeli government, the war cabinet, accepts that, and that is a big reason why I am less concerned about expanding the war to Iran. But you raised an important point, which is, what do the Israeli people think? I want to say a couple things here. Number one, in a recent poll, 86% of the Israelis, the Jerusalem Post, the right-wing newspaper, took this, 86% said that Netanyahu is personally responsible for the October 7th attacks. He was not able to defend Israel. The border security, the intelligence failed on his watch, and the Israelis blame him for it. So they want him out. That's number one. Number two, a small majority, about 60% of Israelis support a ground invasion. But only half of them, only 30% of them, wanted to be a long, extended ground invasion. Half of them wanted to be short. They wanted to be quick. So there is a lot of concern in Israel as well about getting involved in what could be a much more expanded and bloody war than even what we've already seen in the first 2 weeks.
If Iran didn't militarily orchestrate this operation, 2 weeks on, what's your assessment at present about who did? Because the scale, the magnitude, and the precision of this military attack seems to suggest some very sharp military strategists and tacticians were engineering it. This doesn't, according to a lot of experts in India, seem to be the work or handiwork of just a terrorist organization. That seems quite inconceivable.
Yeah, the belief is that this is something that the Israelis and others underestimated Hamas. It involved 2,000 fighters, terrorists on the ground in Israel. This is not just like 9/11 in the United States. And again, 30 to 40,000 active fighters in Gaza. And they were empowered in part by Netanyahu. Let's keep in mind that Netanyahu was taking more land illegally in the West Bank. He wanted to undermine the Palestinian Authority, so he liked the idea of a stronger Hamas that he thought was just focusing on governing Gaza. Well, one thing that we can both agree on is that they were not just focused on governing Gaza. To pull this off would have been a matter of probably a year plus of planning, of strategic planning. A lot of this is new technology. You probably saw the videos of some of the GoPros that were being worn by the fighters as they were coming in, and then checking it against their maps of what they believed, what they expected in terms of the where the Israelis and how they laid out their forward bases. And then also you just had the fact that the Israelis were taking their eye off the ball. So many of the Israeli Defense Forces had been moved to the West Bank to respond to Palestinian reprisals, many of which were violent, as the Israelis were illegally taking more land. Netanyahu was not, there was enormous internal focus in Israel on all of those social demonstrations against the judicial reform. 1 million people out some weekends. That's 10% of the whole population. General strikes. Members of the senior defense and intelligence forces of Israel saying that they were not going to serve if Netanyahu proceeded with his judicial reforms. So some of this is Hamas being much more capable than people thought. Some of this is Israel truly being caught with their pants down. And there will be a full commission, like we had in the United States, the 9/11 Commission, that does a forensic investigation into just exactly how the Israelis got this so wrong.
American President Joe Biden, in public comments, has said that his gut and his instinct tells him that Hamas attacked Israel at this time because of, amongst various reasons, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Now, we've discussed this when the G20 summit happened. You were on our show soon after, and we were talking about the strategic significance of that corridor. Do you think this is actually possible that the G20 summit happens in September, and now in October Hamas expedites the timeline for this because of the IMEE and because Israel and Saudi Arabia are getting closer together?
The India is responsible. I hadn't heard that yet, but I'm happy to debunk it. Again, the fact that this was going to take over a year to put together, and we're talking about...
Why would the president say it? Because what you're saying is absolutely correct. It baffles logic and it doesn't really make sense, but he said this publicly, the American president.
No. But he said it in the context of the broader relationship, the normalization of relations between the Gulf states and Israel. And that, of course, has been happening for a long time. So in this regard, the corridor that you talk about, which still is very much a nominal thing, but is very much part of a broader geopolitical pivot, which normalized and stabilized high-level politics in the region, but at the expense of the Palestinians. So the Abraham Accord is part of that, and much more significant, the diplomatic breakthrough between Israel and Bahrain, Morocco, and the UAE. Then there's the Saudi relationship with Israel, which was moving towards normalization. It was imminent. It was going to happen within probably a couple of months. Biden's been talking a lot more about that than he's spoken about India's role in the corridor, but the corridor as well. In other words, you have all of these different efforts that are showing that Israel can be a part of normal civil society and normal geopolitics in the region and beyond. And not only are the Palestinians forgotten about, but literally their position gets worse every day. So absolutely, for all of those in the world that believe that you can do everything you want with Israel and the Palestinians can be forgotten, that's not acceptable. And I think everybody learned that. Everybody learned their, in a sense, collective complicity in forgetting about the Palestinians on October 7th.
Now, the two-state solution has been a dying idea, at least in Israel. The Netanyahu government has been working very hard to bury it. Does this attack make a two-state permanent solution even more improbable, because it's being spoken of now more internationally than it has in the last 2 decades?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been talking about Israel a lot for the last year, and no one's been asking me about the two-state solution, and now they are. So you're right about that. But, you have to have not only the international community focused on it, you have to have governance on the ground. And right now, governance on the ground is focusing on fighting a war that's going to expand. It's not focusing on how to create peace. You're going to have more radicalization among the Palestinians because of all of those civilians that are getting killed. And you're going to have more religious radicalization in Israel, too, after what happened on January 7th. So I think we're getting farther away, not closer. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But, it was Henry Kissinger that once you don't get peace until all sides are exhausted. And it is true that we're getting closer to all sides getting exhausted. So I don't know if that's a two-state solution, given the reality of what Gaza will look like. And we still have no idea how Gaza will be governed, who will be in charge, what will be the security mechanisms. We're not close to that. But certainly in terms of the Palestinians in the West Bank, I think there will be significant and redoubled efforts after all of this is over. When the after is very much an open question at this point.
In the interview I did with Ehud Barak, he said now more than after 1993, there is a possibility that Egypt, Jordan, the Emirates, Qatar and some of the other Arab countries come together in a Gulf coalition that can potentially manage Gaza after the Israeli military intervention. Earlier, the Egyptian president had said a flat no, nobody wanted to come in because it would have been felt that they were coming in riding on an Israeli bayonet. Do you think that possibility exists, that some kind of an Arab coalition governs Gaza and later hands over to the Palestinian Authority?
That's what Ehud wants. I've spoken to him about that a few times in the last couple of weeks as well. I just think we're very far from that geopolitically. I don't see the states in the region at this point coming together and accepting that as an outcome.
You spoke of the inevitability of American military assets being targeted in the region once Israel goes into Gaza. If that were to happen, do you think the US military will intervene in favor of Israel? So far, typically, the Israelis haven't sought or asked for America to come to their defense. They said we can do it on our own. Is that likely to happen, and how could that change the nature of this conflict?
Yeah, unlike the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where the Americans fought a proxy war, are fighting a proxy war, but are doing a lot to keep NATO out. And that means no no-fly zone, no direct Americans involved in combat, all of that. This is very different. This is the Americans telling Iran directly, do not get involved in this war, or the Americans will be involved directly. So certainly if the United States were to see the Iranians actually participate, you would see the Americans respond directly. If Hezbollah gets involved and opens up a wide war, I think you would see the Americans involved directly. So yes, there is actually a reasonably high likelihood going forward as the war expands that you will see the Americans participate. They already are participating in the sense that American servicemen have already been injured. In 2 years of fighting almost in Russia, Ukraine, that hasn't happened.
How much of the support that we are seeing from the Biden administration is down to ideological support to the Israeli cause, and how much of it is down to the elections in the US next year?
It's mostly down to the fact that Israel is the most important ally of the United States, and that is true for Democrats and Republicans, even though Biden does not like or trust Netanyahu. So I don't think this would change very much outside of an election campaign, honestly. Certainly, we now have a House Speaker who is very strongly pro-Israel. That is a theological issue to a degree, and that was the first major piece of legislation he pushed when he finally got support from all of his Republican caucus yesterday. That's interesting. But the fact is, the United States is going to be very strongly aligned with this Israeli government through thick and thin. That would be true in a Republican administration as well. And also, unlike the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the U.S. will be alone in how strong it supports Israel. There was, of course, a resolution penned by Brazil at the Security Council. The Americans were alone in vetoing it. The French voted in favor. The Brits abstained. Going forward, this is much harder for the Americans to pull off globally, precisely because most countries in the world strongly support a ceasefire, including a lot of American allies. The United States will support the Israelis in terms of an eventual ground campaign.
Let's spend a moment on the thinking in countries like Turkey, Russia, and China, and how you see other world powers look at the current situation and the way that it's evolving.
Well, I mean, the fact is that most countries around the world want a ceasefire now. They want an end to the fighting. They have seen the last 2 weeks an enormous amount of Palestinians killed. We don't know the exact numbers because they come from Hamas, but certainly far more civilians killed than we saw on October 7th. And most of the world wants a ceasefire. A lot of the world is opposed to Israel, just generally the Muslim world, clearly a lot of the global South in addition. And many countries out there refuse to condemn Hamas. The Saudis actually did. They condemned both Hamas and they condemned Israel. That's unusual. Most of the Muslim world has not done that. I would say in general, this is, a much more challenging environment for the Israelis to operate in. And that is certainly going to only grow. The pressure on them will only grow. the demonstrations against them will only grow as you see larger and larger numbers of Palestinian casualties.
Lastly, we've seen a change in the pact in Beijing, in Xi Jinping's cabinet, as if this conflict were to escalate. Do you think China could look at this as an opportunity to make a go for Taiwan at a time when America's attention, the world's attention is divided?
Not even close. The Chinese are actually ramping up dramatically their plans behind the scenes for the direct summit meeting in San Francisco next month at APEC between Biden and Xi Jinping. They're talking about the new working channels, which include the defense ministry, which will be helped by their new defense minister, who's not under sanctions. The last one that was removed for corruption was under U.S. sanction. I think you'll see a lot of cooperation on artificial intelligence. You'll see some on fentanyl. This is not suddenly a breakout time for entente between the two countries, but the likelihood of the Chinese taking advantage, as you suggest, and doing a military flyer in Taiwan is virtually zero.
Ian Bremmer, for your frank and sharp insights, as always, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Good to see you, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Be good.
Bye-bye. I'm slipping into a quick break right now. When we come back, we'll have a lot more. Stay with us. Back in a moment.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
Hello and welcome. Filmmaker Vidhu Vinod Chopra is back on the big screen with his latest offering, 12th Fail. This film captures the heart-rending real-life story of a poor boy from a backward village in Madhya Pradesh's Moraina, Chambal, Sudhir Kumar Mishra fails his 12th board examination because he doesn't want to cheat. After years of insanely intense struggle, Manoj goes on to become a UPSC IPS officer in his final attempt. The travail and triumph of Manoj was already a best-selling book and an inspiration for lakhs of government. And Shraddha, we wish you all the best. You've obviously worked very hard, as would be apparent to anybody who's had an opportunity to watch the film, in bringing this together. Now let's see what kind of a response you get from the ultimate decider, who is the Indian viewer, and whether they make the effort to come out and watch your film on the big screen. Thank you very much. Thank you for inspiring people with your story, and to all of you for making the effort of bringing this together. Thank you. I wish you all the best. This is where we slip into a very quick break. I'll have more for you when we come back on the other side. Keep watching India Today.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics and insights that truly matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp with the #1 election team as we gear up for the upcoming assembly elections. Scan the QR code on your screen now.
Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Follow these steps. Open WhatsApp on your phone. Check for a new updates tab. Select Find Channel and type India Today. After finding the channel, tap the Follow button.
दिल्ली के लोगों का क्या कसूर है? दिल्ली के लोग क्यों सफ़र करें? दिल्ली के लोगों ने मेहनत करके पूरे साल अपना पोल्यूशन कम किया है. हम लोगों ने 25% पूरा साल अपना पोल्यूशन कम किया है. वी हैव कम इन गुड, सेटिस्फैक्ट्री और मॉडरेट कैटेगरी. लेकिन इस दौरान आसपास पंजाब से और हरियाणा से जो पराली का धुआं आ रहा है, वो देख के ही पता चल रहा है कि ये पड़ोसी राज्यों से जो फसलें जल रही है, उनका धुआं बहुत तेज़ी से दिल्ली के अंदर आ रहा है. पूरी दिल्ली जो है वो इस हवा से एक तरह से दम घोटू हवा है. कांग्रेस से अपील करना चाहता हूँ कि वो पंजाब सरकार से कह के किसानों को सुविधाएं मुहैया कराए. कहीं ना कहीं कमी सरकारों की तरफ से नजर आ रही है.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com. You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
Today, Gaza is waiting for urgent and vital humanitarian aid. According to international law, the Palestinian Liberation Movement, Hamas, is fighting the occupation and has a legitimate right. Mr. President, according to our negotiations, Hamas is ready to release civilian prisoners. On the other hand, the world should support the release of 6,000 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. I say frankly to the American statesmen who are now managing the genocide in Palestine that we do not welcome to expansion of the war in the region. But I warn, if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared from this fire.
महुआ मित्रा के दोस्त थे जय, जिन्होंने खुद ही एडमिट कर लिया या उन्होंने अपनी लड़ाई में आकर ये सारे भेद खोल दिए। और उसके बाद एक बहुत बड़ा व्यापारिक घराना है जिसके पे एलिगेशन लगाए थे, उसने आके एफिडेविट देकर मान लिया कि इस तरह से इसकी आईडी जो से हमारी तरफ से यूज की गई थी और इसके पोस्ट हमने इसके सवाल पोस्ट किए थे। हमने अब तक सुना नहीं कि किसी ने भी इस तरह से कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल पोस्ट पर बैठकर एक आप सांसद होकर और आप उसको गिरवी डाल दो, बेचने का काम करो कि आपका जो दिल करता करो। आप पैसों के लिए अपने सांसद की आईडी और अपना सांसद का जमीर बेचेंगे तो फिर कार्रवाई तो आपके ऊपर होगी।
विषय की गंभीरता को देखते हुए कमेटी ने तय किया है कि महुआ मित्रा को 31 तारीख को बुलाया जा रहा है, वो आए और अपने बचाव में अपने पक्ष में जो कहना तो कहें। साथ ही साथ कमेटी ने भी निर्णय लिया है, इसमें आईटी मंत्रालय और गृह मंत्रालय को चिट्ठी भेज के उनका विवरण भी उपलब्ध कराने का निर्देश कमेटी के द्वारा दिया गया।
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Co-presented by
हर घर का हीरो ग्रीन प्लाई का E0.
Co-powered by the bold look of Kohler.
Good evening, you're watching News Today. We've got a big explosive interview lined up for you. Mahua Moitra breaks her silence on the cash for query controversy. That lined up next with Rajdeep Sardevai. First up, the headlines. Trinamool MP Mahua Moitra seeks more time after ethics panel summons her on October 31st in cash for query probe. Says she will give her statement, but after 4th November. Amit Shah makes a big OBC pitch in poll-bound Telangana, brands KCR's party as anti-poor and anti-OBC. Vows to make an OBC member the chief minister if BJP is voted to power. Israel offensive against Hamas intensifies. Over 250 Hamas terror targets struck. Top Hamas leaders eliminated. Fresh rocket strikes hit Tel Aviv. Russian President Putin hosts Iran and Hamas meeting in Moscow. Israel condemns Hamas visit. Russia defends, says necessary to keep contact with all sides of the war. This is a big Make in India boost. Tata Group all set to become the first ever iPhone maker in India for domestic and global markets. All right, for that exclusive interview, cutting across to our consulting editor, Rajdeep Sardesai.
Hello and welcome to this India Today special. For the last 2 weeks, a politician has been in the eye of a gathering storm over a cash for queries scandal in Parliament, an alleged scandal with serious charges being made that she received benefits, cash and kind for asking questions in Parliament and gave her login and password to an influential business person. These allegations are now part of an ethics committee in Parliament. She hasn't spoken as yet in public. Joining us now for her first interview and breaking her silence is the Trinamool Congress MP Mahua Moitra. Appreciate your joining us, Mahua Moitra. I want to ask you right at the very outset, do you accept that the charges that have been made against you, which are now part of an ethics committee investigation, are very serious in nature?
The very nature of the Ethics Committee, Rajdeep, I have in front of me the Parliamentary Committee on Ethics, and the first thing that the Ethics Committee tells you that any complaint that has to be made that is not false, frivolous, vexatious, and has to be made in good faith. Let us look at who's making the charges here. Please let us look at who's making the charges. The charges been made by by not some researcher advocate in the Supreme Court. The charge has been made by a person with an established acrimonious personal relationship with me who is engaged in a custody battle over a pet. As ridiculous as it may sound, that is the established truth. These charges have then been forwarded on to by a member of parliament who has been engaged in a very bitter feud with me over the last 3 or 4 years, and against whom I have even filed a privilege motion for faking his academic qualifications, which, by the way, the very same Privileges Committee should look into and has not looked into. So the charges right now, the very basis of it reaching the Ethics Committee is false and frivolous.
Let me therefore, let's look at it specifically. Let's break this down. The most serious charges were made by Mr. Jay Dehadrai, a lawyer who filed a complaint to the CBI, which has been picked up by Member of Parliament Nishikant Dubey. In that complaint, according to him, according to Mr. Dehadrai, the favors given to you by a businessman, Darshan Hiranandani, and I'll come to him later, include iPhones, diamond and emerald jewelry, Hermes scarves, 35 pairs of Salvatore Ferragamo shoes, French-Italian wines, luxury cosmetics from Dubai, Gucci crocodile leather Baluti bags, and importantly cash in rupees, UK pounds amounting to 2 crores.
Don't forget
Your
the cash.
response.
All right. Okay. So the first thing I want to ask you is this, that anyone can make any allegation. Yeah. Hold on 1 minute. Let me make. So he's mentioned cash. So the first question here is, anyone can make an allegation. I can tell you, Rajdeep, tomorrow that I have come outside your house and I've given you 5 crores in cash to do a show against so-and-so. I can do that. The onus is on the complainant to prove it. The entire list that he seems to have given, that he says he has given, that there has been cash exchanged. Where is the proof in all of this? Where is the proof that he has given that any documentary evidence has been provided to show that he's given it? Number one, no proof. I've read this so-called affidavit. There is no proof that he has given it. He has given a long list of things. He mentions, the most serious is cash. Let's just take cash. So the first thing he said is, I have apparently taken 2 crores in cash. That's the most serious charge. Now, if cash is being given, please tell the date, the dates at which cash were given, the denomination. Please give the details and the documentary proof. The person he says who is given the cash is Darshan Hiranandani. Darshan Hiranandani, an affidavit is floating around in public media that Darshan has given. Darshan has made no mention of cash in his affidavit. Yes or no? So you have a person with a failed acrimonious relationship with me, alleging without proof that that I have taken 2 crores in cash. Hear me out, please finish, Rajdeep. They're very serious charges. I have to be able to give my chance to say this, right? Yes. Yesterday he was called to the committee. He was asked 14 times in the committee, do you have any proof to show, documentary evidence to show that any cash? He was unable to provide anything. This whole thing is a farce. If he has seen me get cash, and if there is any proof, please lay it on the table. If Darshan Hiranandani has given cash and they are calling him a so-called approver, if Darshan Hiranandani is a so-called approver, he should immediately say where he has given me the cash. This is complete bogus, false from beginning to end. And by the way, I was a banker that earned 3 times the multiples of 2 crores in 2008 when I quit my job and entered grassroots politics. So the chance that I'm going to take 2 crores in cash, unproven cash, is a ludicrous one. So number one, this is a fake, unfounded charge, and because there is no documentary proof, the BJP is using a media trial to run it.
You know, you're saying there is no documentary proof.